So, it would seem that one of my own personal hellish nightmares is starting to achieve a more full-fledged and functional form in the real world. What's up, guys? Phoenix here. This video I'm going to be covering the third place deck list from the Yokkaichi team tournament that happened in the OCG territories this past weekend on September 20th, 2015. I believe this was the first major tournament to take place that had all the new Monarch support released, as well as the Burning Abyss and UA OCG import, happen in the OCG territories. So this was the first major event that I'm aware of where all these cards were legal for play, and it was a relatively large event. It had 192 total participants and had 64 teams participate. Now, this tournament happened much like a 3v3 at an American YCS would, where you had 3 players per team and they were playing against other teams to get top spots and top finishes. And this deck list was used by all of the 3 participants of the team that got third place overall. Now, in terms of a deck, in terms of how it fares in the OCG format, I don't think it's the best deck when compared to the Burning Abyss deck that has just become out in the OCG, getting imported and then being given more exclusives than we even had in the TCG, and then also having the Perform Pal Perform Mage Pendulum deck that is running around in the OCG currently. I don't believe this deck is the best deck compared to those decks, but it definitely has a really strong matchup as long as it can achieve its win condition before they can. And the win condition is obviously the Dominion of the legendary Monarch. Now, this card is probably my most hated card in the current point in time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, because I hate floodgates, and this card is essentially a specific floodgate for Monarchs that doesn't even slow you down to their level. It takes you well below their level. What this card does is, while you have no cards in your extra deck, if you control a tribute summon monster and your opponent does not, your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. So as you'll notice, there is no extra deck in any of these deck lists. All 3 of the deck lists I may have already mentioned are the same for the third place finishers of that tournament. And the fact that you can just tribute summon a monster and search this card and have access to it relatively easily, it's very unhealthy. I see it as being very unhealthy for the games going into the future, because this card literally invalidates everything that has happened in terms of progression in the game for the last 8 to 9 years, ever since we entered Synchro era and then transitioned into Xyz era, and now we're in Pendulum era, where there's so many summons from the extra deck that happen, and this card just single-handedly shuts them all down without actually having a detriment to your own strategy. In fact, this field spell has 2 other really good effects that help you establish good card advantage and a good flow of plays. But just because it restricts your opponent from not being able to summon from the extra deck, it's just really unhealthy in my eyes, and it's actually just the card I hate seeing played the absolute most, because there's almost no specific out to the card in your main deck other than cards like MST and stuff. There are very few outs to this card in your main deck because of the nature that it is a spell and trap based floodgate. And it's also recyclable, and it's also heavily searchable. It's so easy to access that by the time you add it once, you better be making an amazing play that turn, or else it's going to be back up on you again. But anyway, that's enough rambling. I'm going to talk about this deck list. There's 3 Idea the Heaven Knight, which is used to summon 3 Eidos the Netherworld Knight. If you don't know what these cards do, this is a roto target. When you normal summon or special summon it, you get to summon Eidos out of your deck. Is almost always exclusively what it's used for. And then when Eidos is normal summoned or special summoned, you get to gain an additional... You can tribute summon a monster in addition to your normal summoner set. So basically, normal summoning this will special this out of your deck, and then allow you to tribute summon in addition to your normal summoner set. So normal summoning this allows you to tribute summon again, as well as giving you 2 tributes. And then if this card is tributed, you get to add one of your banished Monarch spells and traps back to your hand, and if this card's in the grave, you can banish it to basically summon Idea Knight back for free, and then Idea Knight will start the whole chain of events rolling again, of Idea into Eidos into a tribute summon. It just continues to do that over and over and over again. But double Vanity's Fiend and triple Majesty's Fiend for stunish cards, just cards that further lock your opponent down while also having the field spell up. And then triple Erebus, the Netherworld Monarch. What this guy does is if you tribute summon it, you can tribute summon it by tributing 1 tribute summoned monster. And if this card is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spells and traps with different names from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. If you do, shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand at random field or graveyard into the deck once per turn during either player's main phase. If this card is in your graveyard, you can discard one Monarch spell or trap card, then target one monster in your graveyard with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense and add it to your hand. So it can add itself to your hand from grave, or it can add back any of the smaller or bigger Monarchs. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting interaction, as well as being able to out threats. This card is actually just really good for the Monarch deck. It's basically probably the best in terms of removal that the deck has, because it hits a card out of hand, field, or grave, whereas other ones are very specialized in where they hit from. This one's very generic. It also sets up your grave to use with the other Monarch spells and traps that we will get to later. But the last three monsters are triple max C, just to slow down special summon based decks until you get into your win condition, which is the Dominion of the Legendary Monarch, because at that point it will be very hard for them to overcome your big bodies while not being able to summon from the extra deck. Triple Pile of Duality and one Rhoda. Rhoda's only at 1 in the OCG, so if it was at 3, I'm pretty sure they'd play 3, because other Monarch variants are playing Reinforced Truth in order to get Idea Knight out of the deck and abuse it. So there is that. Triple Tenacity of the Monarchs. Triple Patheism of the Monarchs. If you don't know what this card does, you send... It's basically a D-draw for Monarchs that's also a +1. You activate it, and you send one Monarch spell or trap card from your hand to the graveyard. You draw 2 cards. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard, reveal 3 Monarch spell and trap cards from your deck, have your opponent add 1 of them to your hand, and then shuffle the rest back into your deck. You can only use that effect of Pantheism of the Monarchs, rather. I don't know why I said Patheism. That looks like... oh, it is... I don't know. Pantheism of the Monarchs. You can only use that effect once per turn. I don't know. I know this card is Pandeity of the Monarchs. That's its OCG name. So this is the first time I've actually seen its TCG name on Dueling Network. Or its projected TCG name, rather. But this card basically functions as an automatic +1 as soon as you activate it. Because you activate it, you draw 2 cards, you set up your hand a bit further, and then you can just banish this card and get a free Monarch spell or trap added to your hand. And usually, if you can, you want to add 3 copies of the same card. Typically 3 copies of Tenacity, because then Tenacity will search whatever you want, because your opponent does get to choose the card that goes to your hand. So they'll obviously give you the worst one if they have the choice of choosing between different ones. But that's neither here nor there. Triple Monarch Stormforth and 1 Harpy's Feather Dust to round up the spell cards of this deck list. And then for the traps, there's only 6. There's 3, the True First Monarch, 1 Escalation of the Monarchs, 1 Solemn Warning, and 1 Solemn Judgment. Now, Escalation of the Monarchs, it's a continuous trap that lets you tribute summon during your opponent's main phase or opponent's battle phase. That's really cool. Adds for a nice little stunish aspect via Erebus, being able to shovel cards back. But then the first True Monarch is a card that I actually personally really like for this archetype. In terms of Monarchs getting more support. It's once per turn, you can target 2 Monarch spells and traps in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, and then draw 1 card. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 1 other Monarch spell and trap card from your graveyard, special summon this card in defense position as a normal monster, fairy type, light, level 5, attack 1000, defense 2400. This card is not treated as a trap card, and you can only use that effect of the True First Monarch once per turn. So this card is essentially a Monarch-themed Ronin Totem, in the fact that it banishes your Monarch spells and traps, which thus sets them up to be added back off Idea being tributed, and then special summons itself from the grave. But then while it's on the field, it also functions as a way to recycle all of these cards back into the deck and gain additional draws. And that effect is not restricted to once per turn, so no matter how many of these you have up, you can just continue to shuffle cards back and draw more cards. And I think that is very neat, and is definitely something that helps this deck along a bit further in being what it is. But no extra deck, because you want to abuse this dumbass card. And then for the side deck, Triple Fog King for the mirror, because cards cannot be tributed. Double Caius, Triple Flying Sea, Triple Effect Veiler just for standard all-around negation, 1 Galaxy Cyclone, and Triple MST, obviously, for just generic back row decks, anything that wants to try and 1v1 with the field spell, and do things that overall are not going to be enjoyed by this Monarch deck. This deck is actually very weak to disruption. If you disrupt the Idea Knight play, then their turn is almost essentially over. That is something that this deck has in terms of a weakness. But overall, this deck is very solid and very strong, and if you can establish your win condition, which is either Vanity, Majesty, preferably Majesty, because Jesus Christ, or Erebus, plus the Dominion of the Legendary Monarch, then you are basically going to be able to win the game from there on out, because there are very few outs in people's main decks to the Dominion of the Legendary Monarch. But essentially, that's all for this video. I just wanted to show this deck list out, because this is actually like just the fact that Monarchs came straight out of the gate in the OCG and just actually did something good at a very large event by OCG standards, that's actually just kind of relevant, as much as I'd hate to admit the fact that Monarchs are doing well, even though I have nothing personally against the deck. I just don't like this field spell. I don't like what this field spell does for the game, because it invalidates like 9 years worth of what the game has been building up to, personally. But I mean, that's my opinion. You're willing to agree or disagree with me. But, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, like the video if you like the content I'm producing, and want to support my channel's growth now as well as in the future. If you like these deck lists and discussion type videos, definitely leave a like down below. It'll definitely show me that that is what you guys want me to continue going in the future in terms of content for this channel. Links are in the description to both my Facebook pages. Go to the appropriate links, do the appropriate actions with either if you want to get some general discussion with me, just one-on-one discussion. Those are going to be the most reliable ways for you to do so. Click it out if you have not. I greatly appreciate it. It helps make money, and there's no reason to lie to you guys about that. But as usual, I would not be offended nor take it personally if you decide not to do so. Just know that it helps me out immensely, more than you can ever know, and would be greatly appreciated if you decided to do so. It would definitely help me out at the current spot I am in life, because as we all know, shit happens. But that is it for this video. There's another Monarch list that's a little bit different that I will be covering. It will probably go up tomorrow or something from the same tournament, and then I might talk about some of the OCG Burning Abyss decks later. But overall, that is it for this video, and as always, guys, take care.